Good morning, everyone. How are we today? How are you today? I'm fine. I've been up since quite early again, which is really, I don't even know why I keep saying that, because you guys know that I'm up the crack of dawn even before that. So I've been working on this since about 3 o'clock this morning. And I think that this will probably be a 2 or 3 part series, because there is a lot of stuff involved in this particular topic. And what I want to start with today is the aspect of getting to know yourself. Because that's kind of at the center of everything. Everything that we talk about is understanding yourself and getting to know yourself a little bit better. I feel like I'm too close to the camera today. So how do you do that? How do you actually get to know yourself? Here's what I know. Here's what I know. Not just from my own personal experience, but from people that I've worked with. We are very, very, very fond of being hard on ourselves. We're very, very fond of being our own worst critic. And we're not that great at seeing aspects of ourselves that are worth sharing, that are worth acknowledging. And this kind of came to light even more on Sunday night, and I was having a conversation with my niece, and she asked me, why can't I, do work on myself the way I do work on other people? And the short answer to that is, you generally cannot be objective about yourself because you see yourself through your past experiences. You don't generally see yourself as other people see you. So that's what we want to try and turn around. And that was the purpose of the meme that I created last night, is start seeing yourself in a real light. Get rid of the emotional fog. Get rid of the shackles that hold you to your past behavior, and start seeing yourself today as the person that you really are. So how do we do that? I have done a worksheet which I will go through, but I want to start off with, there's 2 ways to look at yourself. The first way is with brutal honesty. And that's what most people do. They're very harsh on themselves. The second way to look at yourself is the way that I prefer, and the way that I paraphrase people's words back to them with what I refer to as radical honesty. And that is, remove the emotional fog. See yourself in a given situation and assess what that situation is and why you behaved the way you did. Because that's about getting to know yourself. That's about understanding your triggers. It's about really going a little bit beyond face value of your reactions and trying to work out where they came from, where they originated from. So that's sort of the first step, is to assess whether you are radically honest with yourself or brutally honest with yourself. 9 times out of 10, you will be brutal. Don't know why we do that to ourselves, but that's how it happens. So how do you practice radical honesty? The first thing to remember is words have power. And I'm not just talking about, the things that you say or the self-talk or whatever. The actual words that you use. Okay? And we will go into that a little bit more when I go through a bit of an example. A good rule of thumb is, when you are going through this process for yourself, and I do recommend that you grab a pen and paper afterwards, re-watch the video and go through this little exercise for yourself. And when you start writing, or when you start thinking about this, I personally think a good rule of thumb is, would you speak to a child this way? Would you speak to a child the way that you speak to yourself, or the way that you consider yourself? Would you do that? Would you be harsh on someone who is starting to know who they are? Would you use words that demoralize rather than encourage? Would you do that? I personally don't think I would. I don't have kids. Yeah, you all know that. But using words that demoralize, there's no point. So when you start off on this path of learning who you are, think of yourself as a child in development, because basically that's what it is. When you are starting out, you are a child in the stages of your own personal development. Now, you may be at different stages of you know, your enlightenment, your authenticity, whatever you want to call it. But at each phase that you go through, you revert back to not knowing what you're going to do. So you take a step and then you get to a plateau, or you kind of go, oh, I've got to do something now and I don't know how, I'm an idiot. Oh, see, idiot. Not a great word. Would you say to a child, you're an idiot? I mean, look at the facial expressions, even in just saying that word. Or would you say to a child, you know what? There's just some more stuff that you need to learn. That's all. Feel the difference in the wording. Now, look, before I go on, what I want to say is, if you are watching this later, someone's on, I'm not sure who, again, that's perfectly fine. If you're watching this later on, just comment with a yes or an okay or a hi or something. Because, guys, if you want to take part in this process, part of it is your accountability to yourself and acknowledging that this information has been shared with you. So if you're ready to acknowledge that you have heard what I'm saying, then type a comment if you're watching this later. That was my school mistress voice. She comes out every now and again. So, again, when you're practicing radical honesty, when you're looking at yourself and learning who you are, and I am referring to my notes, remember that words have power. The kinds of words that you use are incredibly powerful, and you will feel the difference the minute you switch from a negative connotation word to a positive connotation word, or a developmental connotation word. Okay? Keep in mind this one other aspect. If someone came to you with an issue that they were experiencing, how would you talk to them? Would you use demoralizing words, or would you use words of encouragement? That's all I'm asking you to do, guys. When you think about yourself and when you talk to yourself, ask yourself, would I say this to someone else? Would I say, would I condemn someone for their behavior? Or would I try and make them understand that not everything in the frickin' world is their fault? And then encourage them to move forward beyond that point. So keep that in mind. Another aspect, and I almost want to run up and grab my notes on this one, is start recognizing your reactive behavior. Reactive behavior. So your knee-jerk reactions. They're the ones that are the flare-ups. Okay, so when I'm working with someone and they're speaking to me, I can sense when the body flares up at a particular word or a particular situation, and I will ask them to speak about it more so we can get to the bottom of what flared up for them in that particular instance. So, again, while you're going through this exercise, consider what is your reactive behaviour. And again, I'm just going to read because it's some good stuff up there. And what's the flare-up emotion? So define the emotion. And then sit with it. Don't react, just sit with it. Ask yourself, where did this originate from? Why do I feel like this? Sit with that. I guarantee you, within a matter of minutes, you will be taken back to a similar situation that happened to you in your past, where you reacted that way, and then further and further and further down the track. And you will start understanding why you are reacting the way you are to any given situation. When you are being reactive, and you pick yourself up on it, and you are able to stop and sit with it and ask, okay, if I react this way, let's say that's already done. What's my next reaction? Okay, let's say that's already done. What would then be my reaction? Go with your third or fourth response and then react. Don't go with knee-jerk reactions, because they're playing on your past. They're playing on your limiting beliefs. They're playing on your self-doubt. So go with your third or fourth reaction. Sit with your first reaction. Try and understand what it's about. I posted this meme about how to start loving yourself. But, you know, as I do, I like to kind of put my stamp on things. So I've actually made some notes on this because I always, you know, sometimes, you know, lists like this, they're all lovely and pretty, but there's so much more behind it. And, you know, things like stop accepting your negative thoughts. Well, how do you do that? How do you stop accepting your negative thoughts? So I have made notes on that, and at some stage before the end of the week, I'm going to rework this list. And I'm going to add more information into it, and then I'll post it in the group for you guys to refer to. Now I'm going to get to the part where it's the exercise that you guys are welcome to try out. Now, I'm going to be radically honest with you, not brutally honest, radically honest. I actually did this for myself this morning to see if the chart would work, and I kind of contemplated whether or not I should run through my example with you guys, because it's actually quite deep and personal for me. And sharing this with you is going to be a really super vulnerable moment for me. But if I expect you guys to be radically honest with yourself and then have the courage to walk out into the outside world and be radically honest with the outside world, then I've got to be able to do that with you guys as well. So I was going to use a dummy example. I'm not going to. I am nervous as all get out right now. But I want to go through this with you to help you understand the process, because this is a process I go through on a regular basis. It's the process I go through with my clients. It's the process I go through when I'm trying to sort something out for myself. So this should almost have been another video. However, I'm going to keep going. There's 5 questions, okay? Now this is the part, and I will mark the time once the video goes live. The first question, what is it that I don't like about myself? Simple. Usually the easiest thing in the world to answer. It's much harder to sort of, when you're starting out on this journey, to identify things that you like about yourself. And the other aspect of that is that when you are wanting to develop or change or do whatever it is that you want to define it as, the things that you want to work on are the things that rub you the wrong way, the things that you don't like about yourself. So the first question is, what don't you like about yourself? The second question, is this radical honesty or brutal honesty? Now this will make sense once I go through it. The third question, where did it come from? So this is where you get to logic it out. Okay, you get to use your brain and say, well, where did it come from? Then the last question is in 2 parts. In regard to this aspect, what am I really? What am I really in the outward reflection? And then what am I really in the inward reflection? So I'm going to run through this, and I'm going to try and be real quick because I'm shitting myself here. True story. So, what I don't like about myself, I so don't want to do this, people. I so don't want to do this, but I will. What I don't like about myself is that I'm needy. And if I ask myself, is this radical honesty or is it brutal honesty? The answer to that would be, that is brutal honesty. I would never, ever, ever say to someone, you are so needy. I wouldn't use that word. I wouldn't use that terminology. So why would I apply it to myself? So there's the rule of thumb. Would you say to another person, you know, the aspect of yourself that you don't like? Would you say it that way? Or if you were speaking to a child, would you say it that way? That's the difference between radical honesty and brutal honesty. So in my saying I'm needy, that's being brutal. That's like kicking the guts type of stuff. The radical aspect, the radical honesty aspect of that, if I remove myself from the situation and what I would say to someone who said this to me would potentially be, I've never felt good enough to be loved, and I've never allowed myself to feel wanted. So two aspects there. So where did this come from? For myself, and I shared with you guys last week the story of my conception and my, you know, part of my gestation period. That's where this comes from for me. That I was conceived while Mum was on the pill, so that made me feel, and I knew that from quite a young age, made me feel I wasn't wanted. And then the aspect of that I learned later in life that they had tried to abort the pregnancy. Well, maybe I'm not supposed to be here. Maybe I'm not supposed to be needed. Maybe I'm not supposed to be wanted. So those two things to the whole aspect of I'm needy. The other thing I came up with, and this is, I'm sharing this with you guys because once you start this process, there are going to be thoughts that come up through in your head that you kind of go, wow, I never actually even thought of that. This is about understanding yourself. This is about getting to know who you are. So the other aspect that came up is that being wanted or needed feels like responsibility. And I did go further into that. So what am I really? The outward reflection. If I look at all of this, what am I really? If I'm not actually needy and it's an aspect of not feeling wanted, what's the opposite of that? What is the opposite of it? So whatever you identify as something you don't like, what's the opposite? The opposite for me is I'm essential to the people in my life. And even as I say that, I feel the truth of it. I am absolutely essential to the people in my life. Kind of cool. I like it. The inner reflection aspect of it. Who are you to yourself? So the outward reflection is who are you to the people around you? Because again, much easier to reflect outwards than it is inwards. The inner reflection part, this is where you get to toot your own horn. And that's exactly what I've done. I'm an extraordinary human. That's my inward reflection. That's my acknowledgement of myself. And being loved is not a responsibility, it's a gift to be treasured. Now I did then go on, because you know I get stuck in these things too and I have to work it all out. That's the chart that I did. And then I asked myself more questions on the back. Because that's what happens. That's what happens when you start looking inward and trying to understand who you are. You will continue to come up with questions. I'm going to run through some of them. So for me, responsibility, the thing that flared up for me is that responsibility of receiving a gift is the reciprocation of that. So why is reciprocation a responsibility? These are the kinds of things you ask yourself. If you were dealing with anger and, you know, you got to your inner reflection that I'm actually a loving person who hasn't been accepted, big one with anger, then why? Why do you feel that you know, the loving aspect of you and the loving aspect of who you are is not being accepted, and that then triggers your anger? I'm not going to go any further with this. I did actually write an awful lot more, but that's kind of, you know, my stuff. But what I want to say to you guys is, if you undertake this, again, give yourself respect. You offer respect and love to others, offer it to yourself. Don't be harsh on yourself. Don't. There's enough people out there that are happy to do that for you. Why do you do it to yourself? So be radically honest. Remove the emotional fog. Look at yourself the way you would look at another person, or the way you would look at a child who is learning how to be who they are. And consider the words that you use. Would you use these words that you apply to yourself? Would you use them against another person? It's probably the key takeaway, right? So I'm going to try and get out of my mega serious mode now. And I just want to remind you all, first of all, be gentle on yourself. These processes that I come to you with, they can trigger a lot of stuff. So be gentle on yourself. Secondly, I am always here. If you go through this process and you get stuck, book some time. If you're ready to start your own development and you need someone to help you along, book some time. I'm the expert in this stuff. If you haven't realized that by now, you haven't watched enough of my videos. So book some time. Let's get you started. And if you go through this process and you come up with some results that surprise you, let us know in the group. It's another aspect of the acknowledgement. It's another aspect of feeling that you can express who you are and still feel safe and still feel that you're accepted for that. Because I'm here to tell you right now, this group is safe and you will always be accepted for who you are. There you go. That's kind of a nice way to finish off, isn't it? Have a fabulous day. And tomorrow, tomorrow's all going to be about how do you define love. So I'll be doing a post later on in the day to be asking you exactly that. And that's what we're talking about tomorrow. Thank you to whoever's watching. I'm not quite sure who it is. And again, if you're watching this afterwards, type a comment. Acknowledge for yourself that you're ready to go through this process and that you've heard this information. Okay? All right then. Have a fabulous day. Love you all. Like so much. So much you can never fully comprehend. Maybe you can. Maybe you can. I'm going to assume that you can. Done deal. Love you guys. Bye.